The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of the Rosewood Manor as Vincent Moretti adjusted his black silk tie one final time. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. The engagement party he had planned for months was finally happening, and every detail had been orchestrated with the precision that made him one of the most feared men in the city. Yet something felt different about this evening, though he couldn't quite place what it was. Guests filled the grand ballroom, their laughter mixing with the soft melody of the string quartet positioned near the bay windows. Vincent's fiancée, Isabella Romano, glided through the crowd in her emerald green gown, accepting congratulations from the city's elite. She was everything Vincent thought he needed, beautiful, connected to the right families, and completely unaware of the darker aspects of his business empire. Vincent's mind wandered as he watched Isabella charm his associates. 3 years had passed since his divorce from Elena, and he had convinced himself that chapter of his life was permanently closed. Elena had been different from Isabella in every way that mattered. Where Isabella was polished and predictable, Elena had been fierce and unpredictable. She had known exactly what Vincent did for a living and had never once asked him to change. The memory of their last argument still haunted him during quiet moments. Elena had wanted something Vincent couldn't give her at the time, a normal life, children, a future that didn't involve looking over their shoulders. He had been too consumed with expanding his territory, too focused on proving himself to his father's old associates who questioned his leadership after the elder Moretti's death. A waiter approached with a silver tray of champagne flutes, interrupting Vincent's thoughts. He took one and surveyed his kingdom. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's power structure. Politicians, judges, business leaders, and of course, his own carefully selected family members all mingled in the space he had rented for the evening. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Vincent's lieutenant, Marco, appeared at his elbow with the practiced stealth that made him invaluable. Marco had been with the family for 15 years and could read Vincent's moods better than anyone. Tonight, he sensed his boss's distraction. "Everything looks perfect, boss," Marco said quietly, scanning the room with eyes trained to spot trouble. "The Romano family seems pleased with the arrangements." Vincent nodded, taking a sip of his champagne. "Have the perimeter checks been completed?" "Every hour, just like you ordered. The boys are positioned at all the exits. Nothing gets in or out without us knowing about it." Isabella appeared beside them, slipping her arm through Vincent's with practiced grace. Her smile was radiant as she looked up at him, but Vincent noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. Perhaps she was nervous about meeting some of his more intimidating associates. "Vincent, darling, your cousin Tony was just telling me the most amusing story about your childhood," Isabella said, her voice carrying the refined accent she had cultivated at finishing school. "I had no idea you were once afraid of horses." Vincent forced a smile. Tony always did have an active imagination. As if summoned by his name, Tony Moretti approached their small group. Tony was Vincent's father's brother's son, and while they shared blood, they had never been particularly close. Tony had always resented Vincent's rise to power and made no secret of his belief that leadership should have passed to him instead. "Vinny, you've outdone yourself tonight," Tony said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised you chose this venue. Wasn't this where you and Elena had your wedding reception?" The words hit Vincent like a physical blow, though he kept his expression neutral. Isabella's grip on his arm tightened almost imperceptibly. She knew about Elena, of course. But they rarely discussed his first marriage. It was an unspoken agreement between them that the past would remain buried. "That was a long time ago, Tony," Vincent replied evenly. "Different life, different choices." Marco shifted slightly, his hand moving closer to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. He knew better than anyone how volatile Vincent could become when Elena was mentioned. The divorce had nearly destroyed Vincent, though he had hidden his pain behind increased ruthlessness in business. The evening continued with speeches and toasts. Vincent's business partner, Anthony Castellano, regaled the crowd with stories of their partnership, carefully omitting any details that might incriminate them. Isabella's father, Don Romano, spoke about the union of their families and the bright future ahead. Throughout it all, Vincent found himself watching the entrance to the ballroom. He told himself it was standard security protocol, but deep down, he knew he was looking for something else, or someone else. As the night progressed, Vincent noticed several of his men checking their phones and exchanging concerned glances. Something was happening, but they were being discreet about it. Marco caught his eye and nodded toward a quiet corner of the room. "Boss, we might have a situation developing," Marco said in a low voice. "Nothing immediate, but I think you should know." "What kind of situation?" One of the boys at the south entrance reported seeing a familiar car circle the block twice. Dark blue sedan, tinted windows. Could be nothing but... Vincent's jaw tightened. In their world, coincidences were rare and usually dangerous. "Increased security. I want to know who's in that car and what they want." As they spoke, Vincent noticed Isabella approaching with a slight frown on her face. She had clearly sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't know what it was. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. "Just business. Nothing to worry about," Vincent assured her. "Why don't you mingle with the Romano cousins? I know they're eager to get to know you better." Isabella nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. As she walked away, Vincent caught Marco's arm. "I want that car identified within the hour, and double the security at all entrances. If someone's planning to crash this party, I want to know about it before they get within 100 yards of this building." The string quartet began playing a waltz, and couples moved onto the dance floor. Vincent watched as Isabella danced with her father, her dress swirling around her like liquid emerald. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. She would make a suitable wife for a man in his position. But as he watched her, Vincent couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was missing from their relationship. A commotion near the main entrance caught his attention. One of his security guards was speaking rapidly into his earpiece while scanning the crowd. Vincent started moving in that direction when Marco intercepted him. "Boss, you need to stay calm about what I'm about to tell you," Marco said, his voice urgent but controlled. Vincent's blood went cold. In all their years together, Marco had never started a conversation that way unless something serious was about to happen. "The car we spotted?" Marco continued. "We ran the plates. It's registered to Elena Moretti. Well, Elena Santos now, but the registration hasn't been updated." The world seemed to stop moving around Vincent. Elena was here in the city on tonight of all nights. After 3 years of silence, she had chosen his engagement party to resurface. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Are you certain?" Vincent asked, though he already knew Marco wouldn't have brought him uncertain information. "Positive. And boss, there's something else. Our guy at the entrance says she's not alone. There's someone else in the car with her." Vincent's mind raced through possibilities. Elena had remarried. He knew that much from the reports he had paid to receive in the months following their divorce. Dr. Michael Santos, a pediatric surgeon from Chicago. Vincent had told himself he was happy for her, that she deserved the normal life she had always wanted. The music seemed to grow louder around him as Vincent processed this information. Guests continued to laugh and dance, completely unaware of the tension building in their host. Isabella was still on the dance floor, radiant and trusting, believing this was the beginning of her fairy tale. "What do you want me to do?" Marco asked. Vincent straightened his jacket and forced his expression back to neutral. Whatever Elena wanted, whatever had brought her here tonight, he would handle it with the same control he brought to every other aspect of his life. "Nothing yet," If she wants to see me, she knows where to find me. Until then, we continue as planned." But even as he said the words, Vincent knew that nothing would continue as planned. Elena's presence had already changed everything, just like it always had. The question now was whether she had come to destroy his carefully constructed new life, or if she needed something from him. As if responding to his thoughts, his phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Vincent glanced down at the screen, and his breath caught in his throat. "We need to talk. I'm outside. Come alone." Vincent recognized the number immediately. After 3 years of silence, Elena had finally reached out to him, and she was here, just beyond the walls of his engagement party, waiting for him in the darkness. Vincent stared at the message for a long moment before sliding his phone back into his pocket. Around him, the party continued in full swing. Isabella's laughter carried across the room as she spoke with the wives of his business associates. The sound that once brought him comfort now felt distant and hollow. "Marco, I need you to handle things here for a few minutes," Vincent said quietly. "Tell Isabella I'm taking a business call if she asks." Marco's expression darkened. "Boss, with respect, this feels like a trap. Why now? Why tonight?" Vincent had been asking himself the same questions. Elena had always been unpredictable, but she wasn't cruel. She wouldn't have come here without a compelling reason. Whatever that reason was, he needed to know. "Keep the security tight, but stay inside. I'll handle this personally." Vincent made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, while his mind remained focused on what waited for him outside. He had learned to compartmentalize his emotions years ago, but Elena had always been his weakness. She was the one person who could see through his carefully constructed facade. The cool night air hit him as he stepped onto the manor's front terrace. Security lights illuminated the circular driveway where several luxury cars belonging to his guests were parked. Beyond the light, Vincent could see the dark sedan Marco had mentioned, positioned strategically in the shadows between 2 streetlights. Vincent's footsteps echoed on the stone walkway as he approached the car. Through the tinted windshield, he could make out 2 silhouettes. His heart hammered against his ribs in a way it hadn't since he was a young man proving himself on the streets. The driver's door opened and Elena stepped out. 3 years had changed her, but not in the ways Vincent expected. She was still beautiful, perhaps more so now. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, framing her face in a way that highlighted the strength in her jaw. She wore a simple black dress and a light coat, nothing like the designer gowns she used to favor when they were married. "Hello, Vincent," she said, her voice carrying the same warmth and steel he remembered. "Elena." He stopped a few feet away from her, maintaining the distance that felt necessary for his sanity. "You look well." "So do you. Marriage seems to agree with you." The comment stung, though Vincent couldn't tell if she meant it to. "What are you doing here?" Elena glanced back at the passenger side of the car, and Vincent noticed her hand move protectively to her stomach. It was a subtle gesture, but one that sent a chill down his spine. "We need to talk, and this couldn't wait any longer. After 3 years of silence, it couldn't wait one more night." Elena's expression hardened slightly. "You think I wanted to come here? You think I wanted to see you celebrating your new life with another woman? Trust me, Vincent. If there was any other way..." She trailed off, looking back at the manor where warm light spilled from the windows and the sounds of celebration drifted into the night. "Then why?" Vincent asked. "Why now?" Instead of answering, Elena walked around to the passenger side of the car and opened the door. Vincent heard her speaking quietly to someone, her voice taking on a gentler tone he hadn't heard since their marriage ended. "It's okay," she was saying. "Remember what we talked about." A small figure emerged from the car, a boy who looked to be around 2 years old with dark curls and familiar brown eyes. Vincent's breath caught in his throat as the child moved closer to Elena, holding tightly to her hand while studying Vincent with curious but cautious eyes. "This is Michael," Elena said softly. "He's your son." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He stared at the boy, seeing his own features reflected in the small face. The shape of the eyes, the stubborn set of the jaw, even the way the child held himself with a quiet dignity beyond his years. "That's impossible," Vincent said, though even as he spoke he knew it was true. The timeline matched. Elena had left him 3 years ago, and this child appeared to be around 2 years old. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I left Chicago," Elena said. "I was already in California, already filing for divorce. I thought about telling you, but what?" Vincent's voice was sharper than he intended, and the little boy took a step closer to Elena. "But you had made your choice clear. You chose the business over everything else. Over us. I wasn't going to bring a child into that world just because of biology." Vincent felt something breaking apart inside his chest. A son. He had a son he had never known about, never held, never protected. The child was looking up at him now with Elena's cautious intelligence and Vincent's own stubborn chin. "Why now?" Vincent asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena's hand moved to her stomach again. And this time, Vincent noticed the slight swell beneath her coat. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "I'm pregnant again," Elena said simply. 4 months along. And before you ask, no, it's not Michael's father's child. We divorced 8 months ago." The revelation sent Vincent's world spinning. Not only did he have one child he had never known about, but Elena was carrying another. And if she was 4 months pregnant? "Vincent?" Elena's voice seemed to come from very far away. He was doing the math in his head, counting back to the last time they had been together. It had been 6 months ago, a chance encounter at a hotel in Las Vegas where they had both been attending different events. One night of memories and old passion that they had agreed to forget. "Is it—" He couldn't finish the question. "Yours?" "Yes." Vincent sat down heavily on the stone retaining wall that bordered the driveway. His son, Michael, watched him with grave eyes, still holding tightly to Elena's hand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner about him?" Vincent asked, gesturing toward the boy. "Because I was protecting him, and I was protecting myself from you coming back into our lives and turning everything upside down." Elena's voice carried old pain and fresh determination. "But things have changed." "What things?" Elena glanced around nervously, and Vincent realized she was checking for potential threats, with the same instincts she had developed during their marriage. "Someone's been asking questions about me, about Michael. Someone who knows enough about your world to be dangerous." Vincent's blood went cold. "Who?" "I don't know. But they approached Michael's school last week, claiming to be conducting a background check for a family security company. They wanted to know about his father, about his birth certificate, about our family history." Vincent was on his feet immediately, every protective instinct he possessed screaming into high alert. "Did they threaten you directly?" "Not in so many words, but when I tried to research the company they claimed to represent, it doesn't exist. And yesterday I found someone had been through my apartment. Nothing was taken, but things were moved. Papers were looked through." Vincent pulled out his phone and speed-dialed Marco. "I need you out here, now, and bring Tony Salvatore with you." Elena looked alarmed. "Vincent, I didn't come here for your protection. I came to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "Whoever's looking for information about Michael, they're going to trace him back to you eventually. And when they do, they're going to use him against you. Use us against you." The implications hit Vincent like a sledgehammer. In his world, family was both strength and weakness. A son would be a powerful lever for anyone seeking to control or destroy him, and a pregnant ex-wife would be an even more valuable target. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "A hotel downtown. We flew in this morning." Vincent shook his head. "Not anymore. You're not safe there." "I don't want your protection," Elena said firmly. "I want your help in making this go away so Michael and I can disappear again." "That's not how this works anymore," Vincent replied. "The moment you walked back into my life, you became my responsibility again. Both of you." Elena's eyes flashed with the old fire he remembered. "I am not your responsibility. I stopped being your responsibility the day you chose your empire over your family." "You're carrying my child," Vincent said quietly. "And that boy is my son. That makes you my responsibility, whether you want it or not." Young Michael had been listening to their conversation with the serious attention that some children possess. Now he tugged on Elena's coat and looked up at her. "Mama, is this my daddy?" he asked in a clear, piping voice. Elena knelt down to his level, her expression softening completely. "Yes, baby. This is your daddy." Michael studied Vincent for a long moment, then walked over to him with the fearless curiosity of a 2-year-old. He stopped just in front of Vincent and looked up at him solemnly. "Hi, Daddy," he said simply. Vincent's carefully constructed emotional walls crumbled completely. He knelt down to Michael's level, his eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in years. "Hi, Michael," he managed to say. "I'm very happy to meet you." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted the moment. Marco appeared with Tony Salvatore and 2 other security guards. They took in the scene quickly, Vincent kneeling beside a small boy while Elena watched protectively. "Boss," Marco said quietly. Vincent stood slowly, his mind already shifting into the strategic mode that had kept him alive and successful for so many years. Personal emotions would have to wait. Right now, he needed to protect his family. "Marco, I need you to arrange secure transportation for Elena and Michael to the safe house in Westport. Full security detail around the clock." "Vincent, no," Elena protested. "I told you I don't want—" "What you want stopped mattering the moment someone started threatening my son," Vincent cut her off. His voice carried the authority that made grown men step aside on the streets. "You came to me for help. Now you're going to accept it on my terms." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but something in Vincent's expression stopped her. This wasn't the conflicted man she had divorced 3 years ago. This was Vincent Moretti in full command mode, and she recognized the futility of opposing him when he was like this. "What about Isabella?" Elena asked. "What about your engagement party?" Vincent looked back at the manor where his future wife was still celebrating their engagement, completely unaware that his past had just rewritten their future. "Let me worry about Isabella," he said grimly. The sound of laughter and music drifted from the ballroom windows, a stark contrast to the tension in the driveway. Vincent realized he was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of his life. In one direction lay the safe, predictable future he had planned with Isabella. In the other lay the dangerous, complicated reality of protecting Elena and his children. For Vincent Moretti, it wasn't really a choice at all. Vincent watched as Marco efficiently organized Elena and Michael's departure to the safe house. Elena had reluctantly agreed to the protection after Vincent made it clear that her alternatives were limited and dangerous. As the armored car pulled away into the night with his son looking back at him through the rear window, Vincent felt a weight settling on his shoulders that he hadn't carried in years. The walk back to the manor felt like the longest of his life. Through the tall windows, he could see Isabella holding court near the dance floor, surrounded by the wives of his business associates. She looked radiant and happy, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse around her. Vincent paused at the entrance to gather himself. In a few minutes, he would have to end his engagement, explain himself to a ballroom full of powerful people, and somehow salvage what he could of the relationships that kept his business empire functioning. But first, he had to face Isabella. He found her by the champagne fountain, laughing at something the mayor's wife had just said. When she saw him approaching, her face lit up with the genuine affection that made Vincent's heart ache with guilt. "There you are," Isabella exclaimed, linking her arm through his. "Mrs. Patterson was just telling me about the charity gala next month. I think it would be perfect for our first official appearance as an engaged couple." Vincent forced a smile and nodded politely to Mrs. Patterson, but his mind was already planning how to minimize the damage his next words would cause. "Isabella, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" he asked quietly. Something in his tone must have alerted her because her smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Vincent led her out onto a private balcony overlooking the manor's gardens. The night air was cool and filled with the scent of jasmine from the landscaping below. Under different circumstances, it might have been romantic. "Vincent, you're scaring me," Isabella said, studying his face in the moonlight. "What happened during your business call?" Vincent had rehearsed this moment during the walk back from the driveway, but now that he was facing Isabella's trusting eyes, all his carefully planned words seemed inadequate. "Isabella, there's something I need to tell you about my past, about my first marriage." Isabella's grip on the balcony railing tightened slightly. "I know about Elena. We've discussed this before. What I didn't tell you is that she left me while she was pregnant. I have a son I never knew about until tonight." The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. Isabella stared at him, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning understanding. "A son," she repeated slowly. "How old?" "2. His name is Michael." Isabella turned away from him, looking out over the gardens where security lights cast long shadows across the manicured lawns. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "And you're just learning about this now? Tonight?" "Elena came here. She's in trouble, and she needed my help." Isabella spun back to face him, and Vincent could see tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "She came to our engagement party? Tonight of all nights? There are people threatening her and my son. I can't ignore that." "Of course you can't," Isabella said bitterly. "Because she's Elena, and I'm just Isabella." The pain in her voice cut through Vincent like a blade. Isabella had never asked for much from him. She had accepted his long hours, his dangerous associates, and his reluctance to discuss certain aspects of his business. All she had wanted was to build a life with him, and now he was destroying that dream. "It's not about choosing between you," Vincent said, though even as he spoke, he knew it was exactly about that. "Isn't it?" Isabella's tears were flowing freely now, but her voice remained steady. "Vincent, I've loved you for 2 years. I've been patient with your secrets, understanding about your work, and supportive of everything you've needed to do. But I won't compete with a ghost." "Elena isn't a ghost anymore?" "No, she's not. She's very much alive, and she's the mother of your child. Children, I'm guessing, since you said she's in trouble and came to you for help." Vincent's silence confirmed her suspicion. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, her tears had stopped. "She's pregnant again, isn't she? And it's yours." Vincent had underestimated Isabella's intelligence, something he realized he had been doing throughout their relationship. She had always been more perceptive than he gave her credit for. "Yes," he said simply. Isabella nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already suspected. "Then there really isn't a choice to be made, is there?" Before Vincent could respond, Isabella slipped the engagement ring from her finger and placed it gently in his palm. The emerald caught the moonlight, sparkling like the tears on her cheeks. "I won't make this harder for you than it already is," she said quietly. "But I won't wait around hoping you'll choose me over your family either." "Isabella." "No, Vincent. Let me have whatever dignity I can salvage from this situation." She straightened her shoulders and smoothed her dress. "I'll tell people the engagement was called off due to irreconcilable differences. That should protect both our reputations." Vincent wanted to argue, to find some way to make this easier for her, but Isabella was already walking back toward the ballroom. At the doorway, she paused without turning around. "I hope she's worth it," Isabella said. "I hope she's worth destroying everything else in your life." The ballroom had begun to quiet when Vincent returned. Some guests had already left, and those who remained were engaged in smaller, more intimate conversations. Vincent caught Marco's eye and received a subtle nod indicating that Elena and Michael had arrived safely at the safe house. Vincent's cousin Tony appeared at his side with a knowing smirk that Vincent wanted to wipe away with his fist. "Trouble in paradise?" Tony asked, clearly having noticed Isabella's absence and Vincent's grim expression. "Family business," Vincent replied curtly. "Ah, yes, family. It has a way of complicating things, doesn't it?" Tony's tone was casual, but his eyes were calculating. "Speaking of family complications, I heard an interesting rumor tonight." Vincent turned to face his cousin fully, his instincts warning him that this conversation was about to take a dangerous turn. "What rumor?" "Oh, just something about Elena being back in town. Amazing timing, really, almost like someone wanted to make sure she showed up tonight." The implication hit Vincent like a sledgehammer. "What are you saying, Tony?" "I'm saying that Elena showing up here with a child and a baby bump seems like quite a coincidence, especially when there are people in this family who think you've been making some questionable decisions lately." Vincent's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but Marco appeared between them before anything could escalate. "Gentlemen," Marco said smoothly, "perhaps this conversation would be better continued in private." Tony laughed and raised his hands in mock surrender. "No need for drama, cousin. I'm just making observations. But you might want to consider how this looks to the other families. A man who can't control his own personal life might have trouble maintaining respect in business." With that, Tony melted back into the crowd, leaving Vincent with the sickening realization that his family problems had become political weapons. In the Mafia, personal weakness was professional suicide, and his enemies would use Elena and his children against him in any way they could. Vincent spent the next hour managing the fallout from the evening's events. He spoke with key allies, reassured nervous partners, and began the delicate process of spinning the narrative in his favor. By the time the last guest left, Vincent felt like he had aged 10 years. Marco found him in his study an hour later, staring at the engagement ring Isabella had returned. "The safe house is secure," Marco reported. "Elena and the boy are settled in. I've got our best people watching them." "And Isabella?" "She went home with her family. No drama, no scenes. She handled it with more class than most would have." Vincent nodded, feeling the weight of what he had lost and what he had gained pressing down on him. "What about Tony's little performance tonight?" "I've been thinking about that. The timing is too perfect to be accidental. Someone wanted Elena to show up here tonight, and they wanted it to cause maximum damage to your reputation." "Any ideas who?" Marco hesitated. "The Castellano family has been making moves lately. And your cousin Tony has been having a lot of private meetings with people who aren't usually his friends." Vincent wasn't surprised. Power vacuums in their world never stayed empty for long, and his personal complications made him appear vulnerable. What surprised him was how quickly his enemies had moved to exploit Elena's return. "Double the security on the safe house," Vincent ordered, "and I want to know everything about who's been investigating Elena and Michael. Someone orchestrated this, and I want to know who." As Marco left to carry out his orders, Vincent remained alone in his study. The engagement ring sat on his desk like a reminder of the life he had chosen to abandon. Somewhere across the city, Elena and his son were trying to sleep in a safe house protected by armed guards from threats they didn't fully understand. Vincent had spent years building an empire based on control, respect, and calculated risk. In one night, everything had changed. He had a family to protect, enemies circling like sharks, and allies questioning his judgment. But as he thought about Michael's grave brown eyes and Elena's fierce determination to protect their son, Vincent realized he didn't regret his choice. Power meant nothing if you couldn't use it to protect the people you loved. The war that was coming would be brutal and personal. His enemies would use Elena and his children as weapons against him, and he would have to be more ruthless than ever to keep them safe. But Vincent Moretti had built his reputation on winning impossible wars, and he had never had better reasons to fight than he did now. Outside his study windows, the city sparkled in the darkness, unaware that the balance of power in its underworld was about to shift dramatically. Vincent picked up the engagement ring from his desk and locked it away in his safe, closing the door on one chapter of his life and opening another that would test everything he had learned about survival, loyalty, and love.